easy to take the Inductrix apart. You only need a few things: your hex driver and a set of screwdrivers. You're probably going to need the Phillips head screwdriver in your set, so go ahead and grab those, and let's go ahead and get started. Start out with your Phillips head screwdriver. There's 3 screws on the bottom, so flip your Inductrix over and go ahead and remove those 3 screws here. I took this thing apart quite a few times already. First, for the battery mod that I did, I can show you that when I open the frame up. Like I said, if you choose to do that, it's going to void your warranty with Horizon, so it's not highly recommended. I had to use this extra screw here because I lost that screw, so make sure you set all your screws in one spot, you don't lose those. Now the top should come right off. I actually got a zip tie through there, so I put 2 holes in here and put a zip tie on this. When I crashed into the metal pole, the concrete pole, I broke this motor surround from the frame, so I had to do a quick fix for that so I could keep flying it with this frame to finish up that review. So now I'll go ahead and grab my snips and I'll take that zip tie off. Zip ties are amazing things. If I was stranded on a desert island and I could pick one of 2 things, Velcro or zip ties, it would be a tough choice. I think I'd have to go with the zip ties. So I'm going to set this to the side, the old beat up frame. You served us well, sir. Maybe I'll use that in the future, I don't know, if I tear up these fiberglass frames. So now you can see the board in here, and the next thing you want to do is go ahead and unhook these, push these rubber grommets through and out from the flight controller and set those over to the side. Okay, push this one down and through. Okay, so 3 rubber grommets for the Inductrix 200. Now we're going to disconnect these cables on the main flight controller. Now go ahead and use both your fingernails to pop these cables off. Be careful when you're doing that you don't damage the wire. So go ahead, I don't have much fingernails here, but I'm going to go ahead and pull these off. Pop these out. Just kind of rock them back and forth a little bit, they'll come right out. And disconnect the camera cable. Now, it's hard to get this board confused when you put it on the new frame from the direction. Actually, you didn't need to undo the camera cable, I don't believe, so we'll go ahead and plug that back in. So it's hard to get the orientation on this one confused because the camera is right in the front. So I'll flip this over and show you where I did this battery mod. This is the original 2 cables that came off the board originally, and I snipped them off here after I removed the terminal that was sitting here that the battery plugs into. So go ahead, if you want to do that battery mod, you can snip that terminal wires to the terminal, then remove the terminal piece and solder on a new piece of wire with the JST. So if you have some JST connectors, then you can fly any 3S 800 milliamp batteries with that. But like I said, don't do that unless you're good at soldering, or if you've had some experience soldering and you don't mind voiding the warranty with your product. I'm going to set this to the side for a second. I'm going to grab my Phillips head, and now I'm going to remove these 4 props. Now I've got all the screws loosened up on the props, and I can take those off, and I'm going to set my screws in a neat little pile behind the quad here. Make sure you don't lose any of these screws. I don't believe there's any extras in your box that came with your Inductrix. So when you put these back on the frame, when you transfer these over to the new frame, make sure that you have the props on the right motor, because if they're not on the right motor, the quad will flip over or not take off at all when you go to try to spool up your Inductrix 200. So go ahead and take your power switch here and set that over to the side as well. there is a spot on this new frame that we're going to install that on. If you have a terminal on here, go ahead and remove your terminal pieces as well, because this terminal setup does also fit on this new frame if you didn't do this battery mod like I told you about. So I'll go ahead now and remove the props, and I'll set those to the side with my screws. And then we'll remove the motors one at a time. Now the motors are pretty easy to remove. Go ahead and take your Inductrix 200 and flip it over. You'll see these standoffs on the bottom, landing gear. Go ahead and pinch that little piece of foam on the bottom of it off, and you'll see a hole down in there. This is where you're going to take your hex driver, and there's a little tiny bolt all the way down in there. You're going to stick your hex driver in and remove that bolt. Once that comes out, we can remove this landing gear. Okay, set that to the side. You want to keep that ready in case you have to use it again. Now once I take this standoff off, we have 4 Phillips head screws here that we need to take off, and that will release the motor. So I'll go ahead and do that now to the rest of these motors, and we'll start on the Inductrix 200, this RAKON Heli frame sitting over here. So now I have all my motors removed, and they are sitting in the direct order that they came off the frame. I'm not totally sure if we're working with clockwise, counterclockwise motors here. So just to be safe, when we plug them back in, I want them all to be in the same spot they were sitting on this frame, on the new frame. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll take this old junky frame that I've totally destroyed and beat up. I found quite a few parts on it that were broken. We did quite a video on this previous to this one, so well used frame, and you can replace this for 20 bucks if you want to, so it's not a huge deal. Then you can have a brand new frame after you learn how to fly, because there's a little bit of a learning curve flying this one, because it does fly differently than a regular racer quad due to the props and the way it floats. It's just a little different in the agility mode. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the parts for the Inductrix RAKON Heli frame, and we'll get started on that transfer. So go ahead and grab your bag of hardware here and your screws that are in that hardware pack, and this is for your landing gear. We'll go ahead and install those first, and then we'll put the flight controller on next. Pretty simple to do. So go ahead and grab your Phillips head screwdriver, and we'll start putting the landing gear on there. Now I'm working on this front landing gear first. These are M1 screws, so you want to get your smallest screwdriver that you have. This is a number 0, and go ahead and put the screw through the frame first, and just lightly get it to touch to your landing gear post, and then start to screw it in place. Don't over tighten it, because you don't want to strip that, because you're actually screwing into plastic there, so you should be good. So now that I've got all the landing gear installed, that was pretty easy. So far this is a really easy build to do. Next up we're going to take the motor surrounds, the prop guards if you will. We'll do three bolts at a time. If you want to, I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference, but you could use a little bit of Loctite as you're putting these on. That might help with some of the vibration. So now I'm going to take a little bit of thread locker. I'm going to put on the hole where the bolt is going to go through, and I'm going to put some on each hole there, and go ahead and start with the first screw. I have that pushed through the frame. Let's see here, where did it go? It fell out, there we go. So it's going to go on the bottom of the frame here. Go ahead and take your first screw and put it through here, and start to screw that into the bottom of the prop guard. And you can make that just a little bit loose for now, and then swing the prop guard over till it meets on the other side, so it lines up here and here. Make sure that if you have to move your landing gear a little bit over to line up with the hole, Want to make sure that you can see through all those holes before you start putting these screws through. Now I'll take the longer screw. Probably could do the outside screw next, but I'm going to go ahead and do this landing gear one real quick for you. And you can check by looking on the bottom here, or excuse me, on the top part. You can wipe away any excess Loctite or thread locker with your fingers. Just wipe that on a rag. Now I got the first two bolts through there. I'm going to take this third bolt, set that on the frame, start to tighten that one down. Then you repeat this process for the next 3 prop guards and you should be good to go. Those look pretty cool. Now once you have a few prop guards on, you're working on your third one, you can go ahead and set it on a flat surface. And this will make it a lot easier when you're putting your screws through. Like I said, you don't have to over tighten things, just make it so they're nice and snug. I'll go ahead and put that landing gear bolt through. This really is a pretty easy build. Just take your time. Enjoy the process. Make sure everything is nice and snug. Now I can take my last one. I already have thread locker on that. Okay, so I didn't tighten it all the way. I'll take this outside bolt. I'll put that through. And we're just about done with putting on these motor shrouds, prop guards, or surrounds, whatever you want to call them. This is looking pretty good. So now we have 2 bolts through the landing gear, and this makes it a lot sturdier. That's looking pretty good. So I'm take a look at the directions. I believe the next thing we're going to do is start to put on the flight controller in here, and go ahead and grab your rubber grommets. We'll set this to the side. You can either put these through here first and then work on feeding them through the bottom plate of your frame. And there's going to be one underneath the camera as well. Don't forget about that one. That one goes in the front right here. You can probably do that one first and then work on the other 3 back here. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Now I've seen a lot of different ways that people drive these rubber grommets through the holes that they're made to go through. I've seen some people use string. Sometimes I will just use my fingernails and kind of pinch them through. And these are really lightweight ones, so you don't really have to apply a ton of pressure to get them through and in place. Just take your time. Don't get frustrated with them. They'll come through. Just work them through. There we go. So there's the camera grommet. That one's on there. And now I can work on getting the flight controller in place. So now I have the rubber grommets through and the flight controller is in the perfect spot. And I also took my Velcro strap and put through the slots on the bottom. If you do that before you put your flight controller on, that'll make it a lot easier to put through there. I had the flight controller on first before I did that, so it was kind of difficult. But you use little tweezers and just pull it through the slot. It's no big deal. Now the next thing I did on here that's kind of nice is I took those foam pads that were on the bottom of the original frame and I put them on the bottom of the landing gear here to make it just a little nicer when I set it down. Now what we can do next is we can either do the motors or we can put the on-off button on the back of the frame. I think I'm going to go ahead and install the on-off button. So to do that, you're going to need those little M1 screws that came in your pack, and you're going to need a washer that came in that pack as well. So the washer is going to fit right up against the side of your on-off button, and it's going to hold that in place. And I'll try to show you a decent close-up of this. I put this washer and screw through here and here, and now you can see that it is held in place. Make sure that when you put your on-off circuit board in here that it does fit in the right section of this plastic frame, because you want to make sure that it's in the right slot. If it's off on either side, it's going to end up being loose. So if you want to add some extra security to this, you can put a little dab of hot glue on this side. I wouldn't do too much, and maybe one on that side, but don't get your hot glue on your wires. And go ahead and plug in your board here. Put your finger through here on the bottom, hold the board up a little bit so you're not smashing these circuits on the carbon fiber frame. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do the motors next. Now I've got my first motor here, and this is the front right motor. I'm going to run this wire along underneath the frame and through this hole right here, up inside the body, and plug it into the flight controller there. And now we're going to take some Loctite, and we're going to make sure not to drip any Loctite down into your motor. I'm going to put them right here where these are threaded. You're going to take your black screw here and run it through. So I'll go ahead and put a couple drops of Loctite in there. Wipe off the excess with my finger. Wipe that off on my towel or my jeans or whatever. Like I said, you don't want to get any down inside those motor coils because this will damage a motor. So okay, now we can put in the first screw. Okay, now I have these 3 screws in, and they do have a little tiny dab of Loctite on each of those because we're not actually screwing up inside the motor. There's actually a motor base plate here that you can see. So this is going to work just fine. Now what I'm going to do, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but see where this cable is hanging out right under here, where it comes up and underneath the motor here. I don't want this moving around too much, so I'm just going to take a small zip tie and I'm going to secure that wire, that bundle of wires in place with just a tiny zip tie. And I'm not going to over tighten it right there. It's going to make sure it's facing down and away. And before I actually spool this up, I'm going to make sure that I have plenty of clearance for my motor wires. So if this is touching anywhere, and it shouldn't be, I'll just take a prop here and set it on top of the motor. So we've got plenty of clearance from that. You just want to make sure that your cable is well away from your props. Have plenty of clearance. You don't want to cut your motor wires. And this might actually be a really good thing to keep those wires down and away from these props. You got a little bit of slack here, so I would suggest doing that. It's not that much of a weight sacrifice. So I'm going to go ahead and snip that off there. Okay, now I feel a little better about that. You've probably got 3 millimeters in between those wires and that prop. So I'm going to take that prop back off, and I'm going to do the other 3 motors next. So now I've got the bolts through every single motor, all 3 bolts through each motor, and I don't have any excess wires hanging down. They look pretty good. Make sure you feed the wires through the smaller hole here. This is actually made for this motor wire to go through. And if you want to, like I said, you can use a little tiny zip tie here. You don't have to. Don't over tighten that because it is a metal frame right here that you're tightening it up to. You don't want to sever those wires. Now this looks pretty good. This was pretty easy to put together and assemble, so I would definitely recommend this. I mean, a lot of the guys in the Whoop community, in the tiny Whoop, flying these Inductrixes on these new frames, RAKON frames, and the other frames out there in the market. But I do believe this is probably one of the cooler looking frames available for the Inductrix 200. So next thing I'm going to do for you is I'm going to show you how these screws go on to fit the canopy. So the canopy is going to fit on right over top of the flight controller, and it's going to give some protection in a crash if I go through the trees or I land on the pavement, which I do from time to time. They did put a hole in the front here so you can get through here with something to change your video channel, which is really nice that they thought of that. Engineers at RAKON usually do think of everything before they do that design. Also, in the very back, they cut a slot for the power button, so really easy to get to the power button and turn your Inductrix off if you don't have that throttle hold set up on yours. You want to make sure you do that. Now in the front here, I do notice that when I have a full camera tilt and I'm tilted all the way up, it looks like it might run into the frame a little bit. If that's a problem, I can probably trim that back if I need to, because this is fiberglass canopy. I can just take my Dremel tool and saw a little piece off the end there. So now I'm going to go ahead and take these standoffs and put those posts on there, and we'll get this canopy installed for you. Now your RAKON canopy comes with a variety of hardware. Very simple to put on though. You have two standoffs here on both sides of the frame that you'll notice. That is where your plastic standoff is going to mount to. So you're going to take the longer bolt of the two. You're going to use 2 bolts on each of these. So the first bolt is going to go through the bottom of your frame, and it's going to screw through this metal standoff, and you can use some Loctite on this if you want to. It's quite a deep hole there. Okay, so it should go through, and once it does, you can put your plastic standoff here and go ahead and start screwing that in to your plastic standoff. Kind of hard to see there. There we go. And you probably don't need any Loctite on this. I don't think you do. This will probably be just fine. Just make sure that's nice and decently tight. Like I said, don't over tighten it. You're going to do the other side, and then the shorter screw is going to go through the top of the canopy through this grommet right here, and it's going to screw right down into the post. Careful not to crack your canopy while you're pushing that through. It sounds like I almost cracked mine. So it should really gently push through that grommet. It looks like I cracked my canopy a little bit there. If you crack your canopy while you're trying to do this, you can get a washer and put around that screw. I believe these are M2s, so you could take a M2 washer. You might have to actually take your time, try to do this without cracking the canopy. And these are fiberglass canopies, so be very careful when you're putting these through. So I'm going to take some time now. I'm going to go ahead and work on this screw, get this through here. I'm probably just going to twist it with my driver so that it doesn't have so much force of me trying to push it through there. This is what I suggest doing. It's going through a lot easier this way. Okay, so now we're playing nice. Before you screw this one into this post, go ahead and add your other post on the other side. So now I have that other standoff on the other side, and I have both bolts through the canopy. There is another standoff in the rear right by the on-off button, but you're probably not going to use that unless you had a super long screw to reach there. That's not going to be needed in the rear. These two will work just fine to hold the canopy in place. So go ahead and put your canopy over top of your Inductrix. See if you can get it lined up with those posts. Okay, I put the bolts through on my canopy on both sides, and I did notice that the rubber starts to get really pinched. So don't over tighten these. Just bring them down nice and firm. Because if you over tighten, like they're nylon standoffs underneath here, and you'll strip that, and then you'll have a real problem trying to secure those. So you might have to actually find some other ones. If you have some extra ones in your kit, that's cool. You can always take a new one and put it on there. On the other side, my rubber did get pinched a little bit So I actually put a washer here. Go ahead and grab yourself a little washer at the hardware store, and that might actually secure it better. I might actually do that on both sides of mine. It's a little off center there, but this is going to work just fine because this doesn't need to be on super tight. So if something grabs a hold of the back of it or the front of it, and it's going to rip off regardless. But this will give it a little extra security. So now go ahead and grab your instruction paper that came with your Inductrix frame and take a look at this diagram. This is on the top right hand side of the page, and this diagram explains which way your props go on, what prop goes on what motor. Make sure you pay attention to this when you're putting your props back on. So if you guys are new to this, especially if you don't know, like I said before, if you put the wrong prop on the wrong side, it will not fly at all. So we've got a clockwise prop here on the front left, and we have counterclockwise on the front right, and we have, looks like clockwise, the left rear, and the right rear is counterclockwise. So I'll go ahead and I'll take my screws and fasten those down. So that's it for the Inductrix 200 RAKON Heli build. Hope you guys enjoyed following along with this build, and it inspires you to make yours as badass looking as mine is now. I think this frame is going to be pretty decently durable. I do have that other full carbon frame. If I break this one in the next week or so, you know, break these standoffs off this carbon frame, if this happens, I'm going to build that other frame pretty soon for you guys. But for now, I really like the way this looks. I think it's going to perform really, really well, and I believe it is close to the same weight. Before I end this video, I will definitely show you that. Okay, real quickly, let's show you some weight on this frame. We're at 120 grams weight. That's not including the battery. I'll go ahead and put the stock battery on there real quick for you, just in case you're running that other setup. You're still going to be under 250 grams. This looks like 194. Probably around, average it out to 195 grams with that, that terminal that's going to go up inside there if you're using that for this particular setup. Now I'll go ahead and put that 3S Nano. This is an 850. Put that on there. And we're at 191 grams. So a little bit lighter with that aftermarket battery. But that's actually, that's pretty nice, guys. That's very, very lightweight. And if you want to, go ahead and go to rakonheli.com and pick out your Inductrix 200 frame and whatever colors you want, and as well as Canopy colors. So I'm going to take this one out to the field and do some flying. Like I said, thanks again for hanging out. Please subscribe on the channel. You'll see more build videos and interesting products coming to us from around the world. I'm Justin Davis. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for hanging out.